welcome to America. It's nice to finally be back in the United States of America after living in southern Canada for 4 years. Right? Just really nice.
So before Trump could buy them, they annexed
Yeah.
us, is what you're saying,
Exactly.
basically. Yes.
I don't know why they're upset about possible annexation. We've been Southern Canadians for 4 years to our own demise. What a great day it is. It feels like Narnia is dying. It's a season of hope and opportunity. And so I'm here, I'll call you a friend if that's all right.
You bet.
Days. And you are in town. Really glad to have you here. I'm sure you got invited to the inauguration. I got invited. And here we are just saying, God bless you from Scottsdale, Arizona. And you're going to teach for me at Real Men this week. Really honored to have you there. But I want to have a conversation with you because I know that you have a lot of experience and perspective in the political realm, but I know you well enough, you're a Christian. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to have sort of a Christian conversation, a little different take on the inauguration and what's coming next. And so maybe a little bit for those who may not be familiar with you, kind of your background in politics. This has been decades of your life. And I think at one time you actually got offered the job to be the campaign manager for Trump at one point. So,
Communications kind of person.
Yeah.
So I have worked full-time in political activism for a job. It'll be 19 years in June.
Wow.
And it's when I moved from sports talk radio to news talk radio. I got saved while being a popular sports talk host back in Des Moines. And I love sports, but then, my worldview is changing. And I'm like, there might be more important things to talk about, know? And I thought I was just going to do a radio show. And I didn't really realize, it just kind of happened organically, that I could do more than a radio show. I could mobilize people into actual direction and action. And through that, and being in the place with the First in the Nation caucuses gave me a lot of contact. People I didn't know.
Yeah, you're at the starting line.
Right. People I didn't know, presidential candidates, senators, members of Congress, prominent members of the media. You don't even know how they got your number, calling you, asking for your help. Do you think that was
God's sovereignty in your life, like something that he planned that you didn't become
I look
aware
back on
of
it,
later?
no question. I mean, I'm a kid born to a 15-year-old mom. I couldn't make it out of community college, all right? And it's not because I wasn't smart enough. To quote the great movie Office Space, it's not that I'm lazy, I just don't care. I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. Yeah. My wife, Amy, has always threatened to write an autobiography titled, I Married a Mailroom Clerk, because that's what I was.
Yeah.
When her and I got married, I clerked in the mailroom at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and it's funny, I'll have people that graduate from the local colleges, the kids will come and want to job shadow me. And I always say yes as often as I can. And invariably, I get the same question at the end every single time. They'll whisper, hey, how do I get to where you're at? And I'm always like, I don't know. I have no idea. I could not, my career path and how this happened could not be emulated if you tried. And so I've just kind of always chalked it up to the sovereignty of God. It's always made me feel like I'm playing with house money. So I tend to go big or go home. I didn't put myself in any of these situations. So therefore, I don't feel like I have anything to lose. Like I'm not looking over my shoulder all the time. Well, if I say this, the show won't be as popular. My engagements will go down. My contract won't get renewed. And I am in a contract renewal year, actually. Yeah. But I just kind of learned that this isn't about me. And the moments when I have nearly failed or made mistakes that were deserving of failing were when I thought it was about me. And it took, you think you know what that means, similar to being married. You think you know what it means to love somebody else when you first get married, but really it's Amy and I have been married for almost 30 years. I'm just now beginning to truly understand what the words on our wedding day actually meant. And now as I get older, now I really, really understand more than I did before what it means to kind of just go for broke. And God put me here to say as much truth as I possibly can. And I won't do this one more day longer than he wants and one more day less than he wants. So that's just kind of how I roll. And in the process, I've met people like Donald Trump. I got a call one day in 2013 from an unknown number. And in my line of work, unknown number either means a bill collector or something really cool. So again, because I'm go for broke, I'm answering it every single time. Sure. Yeah. All right. Because if it's a bill collector, I can just hang up. It was Donald Trump called me on the phone one day. And I met him through a guy who was kind of his first political consultant named Sam Nunberg. And Sam had worked with people like Jay Sekulow, came from a very conservative Jewish family, and was involved in a lot of the culture war issues. And so that's how he kind of knew who the evangelicals were in the Republican primary that had influence, and who is really on the ground in Iowa that has influence. Because a lot of people, when they run, Mark, think that let me go get this state legislator or senator to endorse me, but they don't really drive people to the polls in your behalf like an activist does that has connections. And through that process, I had him on my show a ton of times, talked to him a ton of times. He ended up endorsing my very first wide release book. You'll get a kick out of this story. So I wasn't going to ask, he's wooing me. I'm not going to ask for money or anything like everybody else does, but I really could use this very first book to be successful. Sure. So how about an endorsement from Donald Trump? And so I asked him if he would endorse it, and he said, send me the endorsement you want it to read, and if I like it, then I will approve it. So I wrote my own endorsement.
Perfect.
I emailed it over to him. Half hour later, he emails me back. That's totally fine. And my very first wide release book, Rules for Patriots, on the back cover has an endorsement from Donald Trump that I ghost wrote for him and that he approved. So over these years, I've had an interesting relationship with Trump. I've nearly gone to work for him. I then went to work for Ted Cruz instead and tried to defeat him in what was a pretty knockdown, drag out, primary. I then didn't vote for him in the general election in 2016. I just thought the guy, in the end, has no record. I can't trust him morally, and I just can't get there. And then he ended up being way better of a president than I thought he was going to be the first time around. And I went from not voting for him in 2016 to when we get to 2020 now, and I'm in this very small group of media people that are pushing back on Fauci and the entire COVID narrative. And now I feel like I went from not voting for the guy that I felt like I'm now working harder to get him reelected now than he was.
Yeah.
Okay. I supported DeSantis in the primary because I didn't think there was any way Trump could possibly navigate all the legalities and everything in his path. And I thought we people with a biblical worldview had to win this election. It was a tipping point moment.
So not to interrupt, but I think there's an interesting conversation there. So to me, going into this election, it felt like the damage was possibly irreversible and 4 more years. I believe that the United States of America, not to be hyperbolic, but was headed over a precipice, never to return.
Completely agree.
The end was in sight.
Completely agree. And to me, I'm about the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back, So name on the front says America. And other than the church, it's way down the list. But after the church, this has been the second best hope for humanity on this earth since Genesis chapter 3 has been this country, or at least the values that it was predicated and founded upon. And I just thought we had to win, and I thought there was no way he could win. But I was always going to support whoever won this round because I thought we had to win.
Well, you look at the option. So
yes.
What would you say in that, kind of, now we're doing the post-game analysis, to the soft woke, the evangelicals for Harris, the silent pastors, the folks that honestly, even from the pulpits and the Christian perspective, were either remarkably silent or poked out of the foxhole just long enough to support Kamala Harris. It was a referendum and a revealing on the evangelical church.
No question. And I think that Trump's evangelical support went down from where it was in his previous elections. His support amongst minorities, particularly young male minorities and young men across the board.
Young men across the board.
He won actual Hispanic men outright. So the first time he ran, he did not create, and he won. Unlike Reagan, who created the term Reagan Democrat by expanding the GOP base. Trump did not expand the GOP base. He kind of traded out some of our soft woke suburban neighbors who he was just too rough around the edges for more of the rural people that typically didn't vote Republican because they thought Republicans only liked corporations. This time, he actually did create a new coalition. All right, and particularly among young men and non-white young men, and my fear here's the greatest fear I have about this win. And it's not about Trump. I'm ecstatic especially after they tried to kill him. Mm-hmm. The way that he responded, I think he absolutely got the right message. I think his inauguration speech today, my good Mark, it was cathartic to listen to this. I mean, like I tweeted out, you ever thought to yourself, you're so frustrated with all this demonic BS? If I could ever get these people in a room, I'd give them a piece of my mind. That's what he did.
Yeah.
Right into their faces, he indicted them, quantified his indictments right to their faces in front of the world. The look on Kamala Harris and her husband's faces, I mean, I would have paid real good money to see that in person on second thought, as much as I love being out here in the sun. But my fear is that there is the secularization, which is no such thing as. Secularization is a lie. Someone will always rule, something will always be worshipped. Iron law of the universe. So all secularization does is prepare a culture for what is the next meta, existential, transcendent belief system it'll have.
Yeah.
Like Europe went secular, lasted for 10 minutes. Now it's basically going Muslim right in front of our eyes, right? And my fear, though, is that we're watching on the political right. A lot of people have not been catechized, discipled, and don't know Jesus. They have the right instincts.
Right.
They have the right indignations, okay? But it's important to know the Lord, because that's the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. There is going to be revolution in the West. Nature abhors a vacuum. There has never been a peaceful transfer, a mass peaceful transfer of wealth, prosperity, freedom, liberty from one sector of a culture to another, or from one culture to another culture in all of human history, and there never will be. People don't just once they have them, they don't just give them up.
Yeah.
They'll fight for it. And my fear is, without the church taking the leadership role that it took in the colonies in the 18th century, we're going to make the mistake of the French Revolution, which is power to the people, vote populi. Well, the people are sinners. We're going to storm the Bastille. We're going to drag out the guillotines. And when we're done, with the elites. We're then go.
It was a mob with the government that crucified Christ.
And then that mob went after the church next.
Yes.
Got rid of the Virgin Mary statue out of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, put in the statue to the goddess of reason. All right. And that regime ended up putting just as many people falsely in prison as the aristocracy did, just a different group of people. What we need is direction. And I think the pastors in you and I's Gen X generation, a lot of them that I've known around the country,
they are freaking failing.
They are.
Miserably.
They are.
And the older guys are not finishing well.
Correct.
It is reprehensible.
I agree. So let's talk for a minute to our generation. To give people the benefit of the doubt, I do think there is a legit fear. I don't want my ministry to end up like what happened to Pat Robertson's, where I didn't finish well. And I got seen more at the last 10, 15 years of my ministry as a clown mascot for a political party that almost never was going to deliver for me anyway. Yeah. And I'm endorsing Rudy Giuliani, who's pro-abortion in primaries and everything else. And I think a lot of your peer group doesn't want to have that happen to them. I respect that. I wouldn't want them to do that either. But we're at the moment now, based on where the culture is. Don't look at where Trump is. Look at where the culture is.
Right.
Let's pretend we're on the 18th green at Augusta National. Big shot, big moment, right? And there's the gallery and the crowds and people are taking pictures and you can hear the commentators whispering. That commotion is Trump, okay? But 400 yards away is the flag, the pin. That's the goal, to get to that hole as fast as you can. That's the culture, okay? And if you look past the commotion, okay, and you look at what the culture said in this last election, they're ready for something new. They're ready for something different. They're ready for the old magic to return. And I think for your generation of pastors, this is the moment now, to quote the great prophet Han Solo, you're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home. Okay? This is the moment now. All the stigmas and everything else you were concerned about, and am I going to compromise the gospel for cultural engagement, and that's all out the window now. Basically, a majority of the American people across multiple different demographics said, deliverance. Yeah. Provide it now. The moment is there. View Trump as the Millennium Falcon there, okay, knocking out the distractions. You guys are the X-Wing pilots now. Okay. And now it's time to blow this thing, put that right in the thermal exhaust port and blow that Death Star up and let's go home. He can't do that. Doesn't probably have the worldview to do that.
Nope.
Doesn't have, he's 78 years old.
Doesn't have the anointing of God that can get you into that kind of position.
Correct. But he has clearly been used by God to clear out some of the brush for guys like you and your brethren. And this is the moment now for the church to step up and to step in and reclaim its mantle in America.
Well, and how do you think it's going to go? Because I'll be honest with you, I see a lot of bedwetters in the pulpit.
I agree there are a lot of bedwetters in the pulpit. I look at it this way. As long as it took me a long time as a Christian to learn this lesson, to not be an outcome-based believer. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately worship and integrity is about motivation and not your good intentions. Well, I was well-intentioned, and I'm sorry, we have $40 trillion in debt. We were trying to eradicate, but our bad. Yeah. Okay, but it's also not, I made the trains run on time. You know, the dad who comes home and is distant from his kids, but provides all the time. I had one of those. Okay, and would say stuff to me like, you may not love me, but you'll respect me, as if those things are mutually exclusive. Yeah. All right, we never wanted for anything. He was a great provider. He taught me a good work ethic, but he did not connect or even desire to connect with us on any level. And that's when he was not being abusive. Okay, the reality is the kingdom of God, as you know, runs on motivation. And ultimately, even if in the end your brethren aren't up to the task, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. The Lord did his job. Mm-hmm. He opened the moment. All right. He took that bullet dodged Trump's. I don't think people even understand what would have happened in this country if it was 3 centimeters in the other direction. All right. And so if we don't do our job, then at that point, that's God. That's the holiness and righteousness of God. And we deserve the very judgment we're going to get. And at that point, again, God is good either way all the time.
Yeah, and for me, like I'm grateful, obviously, that Donald Trump won the presidency. I see a man in J.D. Vance who seems to know Jesus, and I don't know where Trump is at with his view of God. I know he believes there is a God and God spared his life. I don't know if he personally understands that God is Jesus Christ. But the policies that I'm hearing are hopeful. Mm-hmm. You know, you and I were talking about it offline previously. Now that we're grandpas, like, what is the world that our kids are going to grow up in? And it's like, man, this could be a reset in a healthy way and an opportunity for future generations. And so I don't think that the church is up to the challenge. I don't think that my generation of pastors has the courage or nerve. I think they're built for peacetime. They're not ready for wartime. But what I am seeing, the two things that I'm seeing, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I believe that, number one, what we saw with the election of Donald Trump, we saw a return to masculinity as something noble and good, not something to be mocked or called toxic. And the young men who decided, you know, I'm looking for strength, and I don't want to just get castrated and take a women's studies class and be good at apologizing as a vocation for being a man. To me, there's an activation and an opportunity among young men that I'm really excited about. Now, they need to meet Jesus, you know, otherwise it's just going to be Lord of the Flies. And within that as well, the renaissance of interest in the Bible. So like Bible sales, Wall Street Journal says, are up 20+%. You've got Russell Brand all of a sudden is one of the greatest theologians in Europe. You know? Right. Yeah, I still don't know if he could pass a drug test, but he's pretty good with the Bible, you know? Right. You've got Joe Rogan talking about spiritual things more than a lot of pulpits and pastors.
I mean, he might have provided, I don't know what kind of audience Billy Graham crusades in the 60s and 70s got in the early era of satellite broadcasts. Yeah. But at least as far as I'm aware, that was probably him and Wesley Huff, the most watched singular presentation of the gospel in human history.
Yeah. Well, and then you had Mel Gibson come on talking about the Bible is historical fact and Jesus rose from the dead. And I'm like, when Joe Rogan And
Who thinks pot is a food group?
yeah.
Yes.
And Mel Gibson, who's nuttier than a planter's factory. And the two of them are actually over the target. And the average,
Let's be honest, Mel Gibson, in many respects, is the uncle or grandpa everyone wished they had at least one of in their family.
Yeah, but they hope he never posts online. They just want to hear him after a few drinks at Thanksgiving.
Yes, correct, yeah.
But I mean, it is interesting because the conversations about Jesus and the Bible and masculinity, they're moving into the mainstream because the need is so great.
Yes.
And it seems to me, I just thought of this, and I don't know if you'd agree or disagree. It seems to me like a lot of Christian platforms, publications, networks, denominations, and pulpits are basically the religious equivalent of mainstream traditional media. That they have been compromised and they're no longer trusted, and the conversation is moved into social media and into new platforms and new content providers. And so I'm wondering, what does the church look like, and what does Bible teaching look like in this new era?
Well, I think we can therefore, based on what you said, and I agree with that observation, draw a distinction between your peer group and the church. The word is not going to return void.
Yeah.
Now,
the church is God's true saints,
correct.
His real family.
Yes. So it may not be the guys at the temple in the robes who have had the training, okay, and know what to look for, all right, but refuse to look for it. May not be them. Might be some dude out in the wilderness in camel skin, okay, eating flies and honey and everything else, okay.
Yeah.
But the word is going to go forth.
Yeah.
I'm by God's grace, I have one of the largest daily platforms that goes out to Christians in America.
Yep.
I didn't know what a Wesley Huff was. I mean, people would pay money probably for the Rolodex on my phone. Never heard the name Wesley Huff in my life. Okay. Out of nowhere, all right, gets on the largest platform on planet Earth and the largest platform that Western civilization has had since Oprah's, ascendancy, and delivers one of the most masculine, powerful, empathetic, logical presentations of the gospel in modern history. That is how our Lord works.
Yeah.
No one would have seen me coming based on my background, okay? Anybody that grew up with me would have thought, that is not the kid. I mean, my wife and I met on an AOL dial-up chat room before there was Tinder, where like literally if you could not successfully hook up after the sound, you were probably dying a virgin, all right? No one that knew me or my wife in that era would have thought they'll be homeschooling their kids, traveling the country, and speaking to ministries.
Yeah,
no one believed
doing a regular Bible study on Romans.
Yes. No one, and I didn't even know what that even was.
Also getting pregnant were higher.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I am concerned about your brethren. I am concerned they're going to miss their calling. I am concerned that they will not finish their race. I'm very concerned about that. This cultural moment is something I'm also very excited about. And it may come from untraditional sources. It may come from Tucker Carlson at times. And you can see he's working out his own salvation and his own views on things, and he's exploring. And
so within that too, though, so like Tucker's talking about being attacked by a demon in his bed. And what you're starting to see is people don't start by believing in Jesus. They start by believing in the demonic.
That's why we made Nefarious the way that we made it.
So talk about that. And so they're like, demons are real. The demonic is real. There's a unseen realm. Evil, nefarious forces are at work in the world. And they're like, oh my gosh, like if you believe Satan is real, you're pretty motivated to believe that Jesus is real.
Yes.
Otherwise, like every day is Halloween.
Yeah. See, I'm a total depravity kind of guy.
Yeah. So why did you do Nefarious? Let's get into the movie a little bit in the book. And that was sort of taking that worldview and then pulling it toward sort of a pre-evangelism, in my opinion.
Correct. When I wrote the book, the point of the book was to take everything that we were debating at the time to its most logical conclusion of where it was ultimately going to go without any form of revival, but to have it come from the darkness. Hollywood makes over 30 movies a year in the horror genre, over 30, more than any other genre. The reason why, they're cheap to make, they don't require a lot of star power, and therefore most of them are profitable. Even if their box office is anemic, their production costs were very low.
And people are always enamored by the dark.
Correct, because we are from the darkness. We're born into, we are like Bane, okay? You just explore the darkness. I was born in it. I mean, that's where we are.
Yeah.
We're sinners.
Yeah.
And so like is like, or as the kids say today, real recognizes real. So we're more attracted to the darkness. We find curiosity about it. Even in this era of, I loved superheroes as a kid. And it's carried over with my son growing up with him. And we bonded over that a lot when he was growing up. And I loved Superman. The Christopher Reeve Superman movie, that was my masculine, role model growing up because I didn't have a good one in the home. That was the first man I ever met, even though he was a fictional character that just did things altruistically good, right? Yeah. But in this era, and I'll be fascinated to see what James Gunn does with the character later this year, because in this era we're way more attracted to Batman, the perpetually or the Joker, but Batman is the perpetually broken hero.
Yeah.
He's never made whole. He's never
lonely.
leaves Crime Alley. Yes, he can't put it back together. He can't have a good relationship, and we identify with that but then he does a lot of noble things that also make us feel like we're still have some self-worth, even while the things that ultimately determine success for a man, family, marriage, he has none of that. And what I thought is if we did this, if we let evil show people what evil really is, then it would drive people more than to seek the light. If they truly understood what you may think what you've been told is good, let us show you what it actually is. And that they might be willing to hear it more from a demon than, frankly, someone in your line of work. And then that might push them into your line of work once they realized this is darkness, so I must then therefore seek out the light. And that's what we tried to tie into with the movie as well. The whole movie of Nefarious, the entire thing is a provocation. The whole movie is a provocation. Basically, the whole thing is a Mark Driscoll sermon. Or it's just a provoking of the audience the whole way through. 80% of the movie is provoking unbelievers.
Yeah.
To consider what they're really advocating and what this stuff really means. About 20% of the film provokes the church. One scene in particular.
Yeah, with the clergy guy.
Yes, and that was my biggest contribution to the script. Carrie and Chuck wrote a phenomenal script, phenomenal story. The one question I had when we got done storyboarding the movie was, well, Christians are going to see this and they're going to be like, there's no chaplains in the prison? Where's the church at? So I was like, what if we put like a woke pastor in there right at the beginning?
Yep.
And then let's show that's the one time in the film where Nefarious is scared. He's like, oh crap. This whole thing, I thought I had this whole thing planned out. It's going to blow up in me 10 minutes into the plan.
Yeah.
And then when he finds out that the church has abrogated that authority and doesn't want to threaten him, then he's in total control the rest of the way.
Yep.
And Carrie and Chuck, our scriptwriters, took that idea and implemented it into our script. And the line that they came up with there after that scene is over, where James, who's the atheist, and he's the stand-in for the unbeliever in the culture, and he looks at the demon Nefarious and he says, I didn't know this was a fight. And Nefarious says, that's why you're losing.
Yeah.
And that line was aimed directly at the church when we put that in the film. It's the reason you're losing is you don't know it's a fight, or worse, you don't want it to be.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't seen the movie, I watched it, I endorsed it. I think it was great.
Thank you.
Sort of C.S. Lewis, pre-evangelism, screw tape letters set to film. And I would say now, here we are on Inauguration Day. Would you agree that dark demonic forces have been actively at work in the political process leading up to this moment?
No doubt. When I got into this line of work from the beginning, like everybody else who starts off in right-wing talk radio, you want to be the next Rush Limbaugh. And without him, none of our jobs ever exist. Yeah. Okay? Kind of like probably in your generation and the generation ahead of you, I'd love to be the next Billy Graham. Okay?
There is no next Billy Graham.
And there's not going to be a next Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
But I also, what Rush did very well is he took political conservatism and he brought it into the mainstream again.
And he made it a little fun.
Yes. I wanted to do that with a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
I wanted to take the biblical worldview, let the lion out of its cage, as Augustine and Spurgeon and so many others said, and then with a sense of humor, winsomeness, bring it into the mainstream. And so that's been like the prime directive of my show from day one. But if you would go back to when I started doing this, or even just 5 years ago, if you'd gone back to 2019, Steve Dace, and said, hey, bro, you're going to be using the term demonic on a daily basis in just the everyday analysis of current events you're going to do on your show, I'd have said, no, that's crazy talk. I'm never doing that. And yet here we are. And there's one important distinction about in a culture war that I think the audience here needs to understand. The old culture war in America, all right, this is that Francis Schaeffer was speaking to, with "Your God is too small" and "How now shall we live," and the D. James Kennedy, Jerry Falwell Sr. Group, that started the old, original religious right.
Yeah.
That old culture war coming out of the counterculture, everyone agreed that human beings had some form of autonomy and agency. The question is, what binds the conscience of a human? And the liberal said, consent does. As long as what I am doing is the other party consents, then it's nobody else's business. The right said God does. Okay? And so this was the clash. All right? What were the limits of human autonomy? What were the limits of human freedom and agency? All right? And what would happen, therefore, is we were talking about the exploiting of the desires and urges and behaviors God gives us, right? So you deal with young men a lot in your ministry, right? Those guys have a natural desire. They want to mate with young women, okay? And so they'll, like me, they didn't wait till they were married to do that. And they weren't virgins on their wedding night and suffered the consequences for it, okay? That's sin. That is when we take the natural things God puts into us and we exploit them beyond how God intended them to be used. We're dealing in our era with a different culture war. This is demonic. This is now when we're not exploiting how we were made, okay, but we are denying it altogether. This is not where your parents' greatest fear was, oh my goodness, I'm going to come home one day from work early. Marky's not going to know, and he's having sex with his girlfriend. I'm going to walk in on it, okay? The new fear of the parent is, oh my gosh, I'm going to come home and my kid's always going to be there in the basement, will never ask a girl out, can't take failure, and I'm going to be doing his laundry till I'm 30, all right? That's demonic. This is now when we deny the things God puts in us and we say, no, I'm not a man. I'm not a woman.
Right.
I'm not masculine. I'm not feminine. I reject those things whole cloth. I will now do things like homosexuality is a perversion of the natural order.
Yeah.
Okay. And so therefore you can even work, live, surround yourself with, love people that are in those perversions without having to compromise your own witness if you're strong in your faith. You can love your neighbor as you love yourself, provided you don't let them impose and influence you. When you get to transgenderism, you cannot do that. Because for me, on any level, to acknowledge your sin and your psychosis means I'm at the immediate point of this introduction, you're asking me to deny the truth of God. Like, I may not even know someone is gay. I don't know who they slept with last. They may not even tell me. But the minute you walk in with mascara, 3-inch, heels, okay?
And an Adam's apple.
And an Adam's apple, all right? And you're not, dressed up as Michelle Obama for Halloween. The minute you do that, okay, you are asking me to deny reality. Okay?
And to normalize for children and younger generations this mental health behavior, which then perpetuates the problem.
Yes. And this is comprehensive, Mark, across the board. So you and I are kids of the 80s. Remember Gordon Gekko's famous line, greed is good. No, it is not. Making money for the sake of making money, materialism, is unbiblical, ungodly, and sin. All right. And that again, but that was the old culture war, the exploit, but that comes out of the significance of, I want to be successful. I want to take what was instilled in me. You want to exploit those things. You don't want to use them righteously. That's sin. The new thing is, I just really want to be on a subsidy. I don't want to start a business at all.
Yeah.
I don't want to take a risk at all.
I think breastfeeding is a lifestyle.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's demonic. When we sin, when we break from God, it's when we take what He has given us with our own sinful natures and exploit them in ways He never intended. When we are demonically influenced, oppressed / possessed, is when we deny all those things and we act incomplete from a nihilistic perspective. And you start asking yourself, why do we pursue policies that there's really, you can understand, I don't agree with it, it's sinful, it's a doctrine of hell. But as a kid born to a 15-year-old mom who thought about aborting him because she was poor, can I raise a kid? Yeah. You can understand why that temptation for that young woman exists. What you can't understand is when a 32-year-old mom of 3 who's married, I just don't want another kid, and she's ready to shout her abortion. That's not sin. that's demonic. When we are now when we go from totally depraved to utterly depraved, where we would not accept any form of light, even if it was even offered to us, we don't want it. I don't want to be better than this. I want to stay where I'm at. When we pursue things nihilistically, that's demonic. And that's the culture war that we're in right now.
But there seems to be a reprieve. It's interesting because right now on the progressive left, they lost. And I think they were shocked that the majority of people don't think like them. In addition, not only do they currently not have a message that is, compelling, a few other things have happened, and that is that there has been the self-immolation, I think is what you called it, of traditional and legacy media. They made their living trying to take down Trump, and you failed. Therefore, you're purposeless, and credibility is gone. The lawfare did not succeed, and in addition, what we're seeing now is they're without a leader on that progressive left, and the heir apparent probably would have been Gavin Newsom, but conditions in California right now have him busy and not ready to take the moral high ground, telling people how to lead. And so it's a wild time where it's like, it felt like, this last year was a political tornado, and now the tornado's over, and the sun came out, and everybody's like, and there doesn't seem to be another tornado. And so for those of us who are conservative, but especially those of us who are Christian, I don't think that Donald Trump fixes everything, but I think he provides an opportunity for things to be fixed. Meaning he can secure the border, but you got to run your business. He could take, school choice and make it a possibility, but somebody's got to figure out how to run a decent school for kids.
Yeah. Yep.
We could reduce onerous taxation, but at the end of the day, you've got to learn how to steward your finances and provide generational wealth. So right now, let's speak to everyone, but especially to those men and those young men. Right now, people are like, he's going to fix everything. A president can't fix everything, right? You need a husband, you need a father, you need a pastor, you need a wife, you need a mother. Human beings have their level of responsibility. But right now, what are the historic opportunities that we're walking into the precipice of, that if God's people will activate, there's opportunity and there's not as much opposition?
Excellent question. I think we start by making sure we understand historically the moment we're currently in. In a godless culture, which is what I would say we are.
Totally.
We can say we're post-Christian if you want to be optimistic, pre-Christian, okay? But either way, we're in a godless society. In a godless society, the best a culture can offer for choices, the best it can offer, and it's the choice we just had in this last election. The total state. The state is in whom we live and breathe.
Yeah.
The state is all powerful.
It replaces God.
Yes. Or what a lot of people call Red Caesar. Okay. And that's what, on a small way, that's what a governor like a Ron DeSantis is in Florida. That's what Trump represents on a national basis. Okay. Almost a monarchical level of figure, no matter the form of government. Okay. But like a herald of a majority of people or a different way of life to push back on the latter. That's the best we can do. All right. We cannot govern ourselves as a godless people, is why John Adams said the Constitution's only for a moral and religious people. We're not capable of restraining ourselves accordingly. And that's the best we can do, is the total state versus Red Caesar. I can promise you, in a godless society, it can get a lot worse. Where you can find the Caesar is now Nero. Yeah. And the total state now is pagan, godless Rome, okay? And so the senators want to marry their gay slaves versus the emperor who's marrying his gay slave right there in the Senate itself, and then blaming the Christians for the fire he started. So we need to understand the moment we're in. And therefore, what institution is uniquely equipped to fill that void, for people to see that there is a third way. And I don't mean third way in the Christianity Never magazine term of third way. I mean this third way as in we represent a different kingdom on the earth, not a process, a different kingdom, different values, a different vision, a different Lord, okay? What does government by the consent of the governed mean in our founding document? It means even the President of the United States has to recognize every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, that our leaders get sworn in on Bibles as a recognition of who the ultimate authority is, and the ultimate authority, therefore, that they are accountable to. This is ultimately what we need the church to be again. Even if you think that Trump is a Davidic-like figure, as much as you could be one in a Western country in the 21st century, he's going to need a David, because there are going to be moments where thou art the man. And especially now that our media is completely and rightfully discredited, well, there's a trade-off to that, brother. And the trade-off is there's no Walter Cronkite anymore to play umpire between the two sides at 6 o'clock every night and call balls and strikes that everybody believes in, all right? So we're in a position right now where anytime the other side charges the other side with something, even if it were to be true, no one would buy it or believe it.
Yeah.
So we need an institution. We're also, another way of saying godless society is a post-truth society.
It's a post-reality.
Yes. And so what we need is, this is the biggest need from the church now. Okay, is to step into that void, all right, and to become the arbiter of objective truth, of ethics, to point people to the one that they're accountable to, where that is concerned. That's catechesis, that's discipleship, and that's the answer to your question. If that does not happen, the things you mentioned that must occur will not occur. This is why they're occurring through your ministry and not through a big brother, big sister program. Because that's not what, and hey, those can do great things for kids who are lonely, but ultimately the responsibility, the institution, that it's the only transcendent institution God ever created was the church.
Yeah.
And that's its job, is to disciple the nations. Disciple them into what? The commands that God gave us, Genesis through Revelation, in his revealed word. Short of that, what we have right now is the absolute best we can do. And all this young male energy that's all stirred up right now, without more pastors doing what you guys are doing in your ministry, you stir all that passion up and all that energy up, and then you don't direct it in the constructive places it's supposed to go. I promise you it will go to the destructive places it's not supposed to.
Yeah, that's where you end up with the red pill community and
Yes.
the Andrew Tates of the world. And so my
Bronze Age paganism and everything else.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, we build men up to bless women and children. The end zone is that men are to be protectors and providers. That's so within that, I think that's a good place to leave it. Is there anything else you're working on or anything you'd like to add?
Later this year, I'm a big believer in the old Irish Catholic saying that what the devil hates the most is to be mocked. And I think mockery of evil, particularly evil when it's an authority.
Prophets do in the Old Testament. I'll be your Bible backup buddy.
Elijah on Mount Carmel. Maybe your God's still on the toilet. Yes.
And one of the prophets, he's like, he goes to the women who live in Bashan and he calls them the cows of Bashan.
Yes.
Even today, that translates direct.
Paul says to the Judaizers, if you guys love circumcision so much, cut your whole penis off and be even super duper holy.
We
then.
got a whole boblet department here.
Yeah, you missed several inches.
Yeah.
You remove that too.
Yeah.
So but I think when evil gets into authority, people don't oppose it because they view it as ominous. And I think if you can mock it, if you can show, it's what Oliver Cromwell was it Charles VI by his Christian name before he executes him, to show the audience he's just a man. To quote Rocky, he bleeds like I bleed, right? He's just a man. And so I want to take Pride Month, and I sense the moment is now to punch that thing, all right in the non-binary regions. Okay. Yeah. So I have a project. I've worked on it secretly last year for about 6 months. And we actually were, given its subject matter, we could not get this produced in the United States.
Yeah, I read it. Yeah.
I had to go to Viktor Orban's Hungary to get this thing produced, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
But later this year, I've got a project coming out. I'll have more to say about it in a couple of months, called Richie Meets the Rainbow. And this is, I hope it to be the definitive parody, satirical takedown of Pride Month. And if people want to get on a list, and so when we get ready to announce it, just go to Richie, R-I-C-H-I-E, RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com, RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. I promise you, you're going to like what this is going to be later this year.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, now you're a grandpa, so you gotta
Yes.
take your shot.
Yeah. This is a book you're going to want to read to all the little kids. I promise you that.
That's
yes.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for teaching, coming up here at Real Men. And, just in closing, I think we both would say we're glad that Donald Trump won the election.
Absolutely.
Catastrophic
Yep.
On the other side. The policies that we're hearing as biblical worldview Christians, incredibly encouraging and hopeful. And my hope and prayer is that the administration stays focused and doesn't get distracted or trip over their own feet and just get to work and keep hand to the plow and do all the things that they're aspiring to do. Because almost everything I'm hearing, I'm like, are you kidding? Like, praise God. Like, this is real? I mean, it almost seems so real. I mean, I come from the People's Republic of Seattle, downtown, head-on collisions with the progressive Christianity my entire life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually hopeful rather than survivalistic and terrifying. And so, but as well, like pastor and Christian leader, it's your job to lead people to Jesus Christ. That's not the government's job. Dad, it's your job to protect and
Amen.
provide for your family. That's
Amen.
not the government's job. Mom, it's your job to help disciple the next generation. That's not the government's job. And so I just would really encourage God's people. Nothing is over. You just got an opportunity to arrive at the starting line of opportunity.
Correct. I think this moment right here, if we lose Western civilization, what will come next? Well, what will come next, Mark, is what predated Western civilization, the Dark Ages. Except these Dark Ages are going to be technocratic. They're going to look like China. All the elites on the left want some form of communism infused through corporatism, command economy, neo-Marxism, or flat-out Marxism. We're talking social credit scores, stuff of Black Mirror episodes. That's what is at stake if we screw this up and don't finish this moment. And the we is those of us who love God and love his word. This is the moment. There's so many looking at all the evil and everything. God moved. God has done his job. He has moved. The story of
the debris off the runway.
I mean, there's no way Donald Trump, even with all his wealth and power, could have orchestrated this story if he tried. Okay? This is hand of God level stuff. So this is the moment we're given a reprieve to show we don't deserve a flat out Romans 1 level judgment. I think I'll close with this. This morning at his inaugural, Trump said the following: we're not going to forget our Constitution. We're not going to forget our country, and we're not going to forget our God. Those words are very powerful if he means them, but do not underestimate how powerful those words are if we don't. If you're going to say that kind of stuff, we better mean it. I trust a guy who nearly got shot, who nearly got JFK'd on national TV, to his limited understanding, means it. Now the question comes to those of us who have a greater, by God's grace, understanding. Do we mean it? And that's the moment that we have to meet right now.
I'm going to leave it right there. I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.